non-partisan process. And in Iowa, that's a loser. That's a loser. Because in Iowa, if you are seen to be trying to get any kind of partisan advantage in the redistricting process, that's going to lose you votes big time. Now, how do we get from where we are in Wisconsin, where obviously the legislature doesn't seem to care very much what you think of it, to Iowa, where they care very much? Well, that's the trick, isn't it? But that's why we are starting this process in 2013 and 2014, not waiting until 2019 and 2020. I am under no illusions that this is going to go through, or was going to go through, in the 2013-2014 session of the legislature. I'm more optimistic that we will have a better chance in 2015 than we've had in 2013. And I'll tell you why. There's two reasons. Number one, in 2020, many of the people that are in the Wisconsin legislature now are likely not going to be there, except for Fred Risser. He will be there. Fred will be there for another 100 years. But other than Fred, for those of you who don't know, Senator Fred Risser has been in the Wisconsin legislature since 1956. He represents Central Madison. But a number of them won't be. So their direct personal political fortunes would not be affected if we changed the way we do redistricting in 2021. Obviously, the folks that are in the legislature now are very wary about having a system in place that would affect them directly. Here's a secret I'll let you in on. They really care more about their own self-interest than they care about yours. But you probably already knew that. The second thing is, though, in my 16 years as the head of the Common Cause in Wisconsin, I have not seen a political reform issue gain the traction that this one has in the last 2 years. And let me explain to you what we mean by that. When we tried this 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, pro-reform legislators were not even on the same page about what the reform ought to look like. There were a number of legislators who said what we need to do is amend the Constitution, take the redistricting process totally out of the hands of the legislature and put it in the hands of an independent commission. This is what they've done in California. Now, what they've done in California, though, the reason they're able to do that is, as you may know, they have what's called initiative and referendum, where they can bypass the California legislature and make law. Citizens in about half the states in the country don't have to go through the legislature in order to make law. They can do an INR, initiative and referendum. In Wisconsin, we don't have that. We have advisory referendums, as you know, which citizens will get stuff on the ballot, it'll pass, and then it'll be routinely ignored by the Wisconsin legislature. But it's an advisory referendum. In California, it is mandatory. So that option would be bad, because we'd have to spend 2 sessions of the Wisconsin legislature amending the Wisconsin Constitution, because the Wisconsin Constitution says that the legislature shall be responsible for the redistricting process. The Iowa plan doesn't require a constitutional amendment, because the legislature still ultimately controls the redistricting process. The difference is they delegate the actual line drawing to the Legislative Reference Bureau. Much the same way they do now, by delegating it to very expensive partisan attorneys in Madison to draw the lines behind closed doors and make their legislators. And this actually happened in 2011. Legislators who came over to the offices of Michael Best and Friedrich, Republicans only, Democrats were not invited, to look at their new maps, had to sign secrecy oaths, promising they would not disclose what their district looked like. And it wasn't until the maps were released in a Friday afternoon in the summer of 2011 that became known to the public. And in 1 week, they were rammed through both houses of the Wisconsin legislature and signed into law by Governor Walker. So that process resulted in that outcome. The Iowa process, though, has gained traction. All of the reformers are behind. We played an instrumental role. We brought Senator Cullen and Senator Schultz, Dale Schultz of Richland Center, as you know, and Tim Cullen, who had been proponents of the constitutional amendment part of it, together with Senator Hansen, a number of other Assembly Democrats primarily, Mandy Wright in Wausau and others, and we reunited them. They said, you know, it's so typical in the Wisconsin legislature that legislators rarely talk to each other, and people in the state Senate often don't talk to people in the Assembly. And it didn't make sense to have two competing reform vehicles. So everyone is now united behind the Iowa plan, as we call it. In addition to the fact that every legislator who is for reform, and by the way, that would include every Democratic state senator, all 15 of them, a number, well, close to like 34, 35 of the 39 Democrats in the Assembly, one Republican state senator, and you know who it is. Unfortunately, he's leaving. He's joining the Board of Common Cause, by the way.
Oh, great.
But Dale, and as is Tim Cullen, the other state senator from Janesville. But the Republicans, the reason they are not publicly in favor of it is because their leadership has all but declared war on this particular process. And why? Because they control the process. Scott Fitzgerald and Robin Voss are the folks that decide what seats will go to which members, how the lines will be drawn. It is a huge source of their power, and it's power that they will very, very reluctantly give up. But here's why I'm hopeful. This year, as we have gone around the state talking to every editorial board in the state of Wisconsin, we have now unprecedented 19 daily newspapers in support of this reform. That's unprecedented for a political reform issue in Wisconsin. You know, sometimes you can get 8 or 9, you know, but there's always differences. These are newspapers that have endorsed, or did endorse in 2010, Scott Walker for governor, and a number of Republicans every time. They are all united behind this reform because it truly is a nonpartisan reform. It really takes the process out of the hands of partisan legislators. Not only that, but it would cost a lot less for you taxpayers, and more importantly, it would create competition. We have none, not a single competitive congressional district in Wisconsin that is competitive. Some are like 57-43, but as late as 1998, we had 5 of 9 that were competitive, now 0. In the state Senate, only 1 of 16 was competitive in 2012. That was the district in Fond du Lac, Oshkosh. All the others were non-competitive. And what I mean by competitive is 55 to 45% or less. So 54, 53, 52. But once you're outside of that window, if it's a 56 to 44 or greater, that's considered a non-competitive election. And it makes sense because if you're not within 10 points, you're not really going to have much of a shot the next time either because of the way the districts have been drawn. So, and in the state Senate, as I say, only 1 of 16. This year, 2, possibly 3 competitive. Obviously, the Dale Schultz seat, it will be a competitive district. But that's the lay of the land. So the newspaper editorial boards are behind it. We have done a number of forums around the state because the legislature, the Republicans in the controlling the legislature, have absolutely refused to hold even a public hearing on this issue. They're that frightened of it. They will not even hold a public hearing on it. So I went to Senator Hansen, Senator Schultz, Senator Cullen. I said, if they're not going to do it, why don't you do it? Why don't you begin to hold alternative public hearings? We did one in Appleton in December that got over 100 people in a snowstorm. We had 320 people in Stevens Point in late October. There were 3 in northwestern Wisconsin in January. There was a big public hearing in the Capitol on February 10th, packed hearing room in the top floor of the Capitol. That was conducted by Senator Schultz and Senator Cullen. We had one at Edgewood College. And this is the winner we're talking about. I'm convinced that if we continue to do this around the state and continue to educate people about why this is necessary, that it will garner even more public support. And here's, I think, where the real ace is up our sleeve. We've been talking to the editorial boards of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Wisconsin State Journal, and Green Bay Press-Gazette, all the other papers. And many of them are considering making support for nonpartisan redistricting reform one of the criteria that they utilize in whether they're going to endorse a candidate for public office. And that is huge, because we have not had that type of support for a political reform issue. Not for public financing, not for disclosure, not for anything. But when this becomes a criteria for endorsement, that gets the attention of candidates. And if that's the case, I mean, one thing candidates care about, even in a gerrymandered district, is whether the local newspaper is going to endorse them or not. They want to be loved by everybody, and if the newspaper doesn't endorse them, then that has a souring effect on them. And it's already begun to work. There was a special election in Marshfield where the Republican candidate, who, I'm not sure when the special election is, hasn't occurred, but it's up and running, it's in the process. The Republican candidate has broken with the Republican leadership in the Assembly and the Senate and said he would favor nonpartisan redistricting reform for 2021. Not because he really does, but because he knows if he doesn't, it would be a political minus for him to do so. So that's when you're going to change, is when legislators and candidates view it as an advantage to support this reform. They're not going to do it because it's the right thing to do. They're not going to do it because it's good government. They're not going to do it because voters should be choosing their legislators, not the other way around that they do now. They'll do it because it will affect them personally. So that's a good thing. So, as I say, I think this is going to be an issue in elections all over the state of Wisconsin in 2014. I would encourage you folks to make this one of the issues that you ask every candidate about. You know, obviously all of us have issues that we care more about, whether it's education or the environment, you name it. But the redistricting process and a nonpartisan redistricting process is the key, in my view, to bringing about the types of political reforms and then obviously the public policy reforms that you would all like to see in all other areas. I can tell you that if this problem is not solved, then I think what we're going to see is increasing polarization, increasing hyperpartisanship. If you can imagine, it could be worse than it is now. I think I can imagine that. And we're seeing that happen in some states around.